Hey guys, Matt Gurney here. It is the Line Podcast, September the 6th, 2024. Quiet week, huh? Lots of federal stuff to talk about. The collapse of the confidence and supply agreement and a big departure from the PMO. We're going to talk about all of this when we come back. That's going to be our first segment. We're going to talk about the Green Line in Calgary. We're going to talk about the FBI blowing the lid off of something that Jen and I have had our suspicions about for a while. And I am going to tell you about rioting and chaos in the streets of my neighborhood. And it's all my fault. All this and more on the latest episode of the Line Podcast.
This episode of The Line has been brought to you by Unsmoke Canada. Canada can be a global leader in reducing the harm caused by smoking, but it requires actionable steps, including giving adult smokers the information they need to choose potentially less harmful alternatives. Learn more at unsmoke.ca.
All right, before we get into this, Jen, can I make one lighthearted observation?
You can, in fact, make two lighthearted observations, because I have something to add to the list.
Okay, that's very generous of you. First, I want to say that the first thing I noticed about you last week was that you looked great.
Yes.
And I want to note, say this very neutrally, that many of our commenters last week in the comment sections were also going, Jen, you look radiant.
Fantastic. Yeah. It was the fever. It was the sickness. It was the fever. Yeah. Because I mean, not that I look terrible today, but I definitely am not bringing the same level of radiant sunshine glow that I was bringing when I was running a fever of about, 39 or so. So let it be noted for future reference, you all bunch of sickos really do seem to like the whole imperiled female shtick. So there you go.
Oh boy, it's funny, right? Because I'm just laughing about this, but basically as the Line continues to diversify our content offerings, Jen's beauty tip channels will always be operate low-grade fever before heading out on a night on the town.
Yeah, exactly. I would also like to note that thanks to the contributors of The Line and the paid subscribers of The Line, I got a new microphone. Thank you. Thank you very much. One in which the wire doesn't keep on dropping out and failing to connect to my computer. So we're getting fancy. We're getting professional.
We'll see how long that actually lasts.
Yeah, exactly. We're also getting you a new light.
Yeah, it's on the way. The only other lighthearted observation I want to make is I want to give a shout out to our friend Ken Bosencool, friend of the Line. Ken was in my town, Toronto, on Wednesday, and he and I had been meaning to hook up for a while, and we had an opportunity to grab a lunch. And it's the first week back. Kids are at school. We're getting back to full strength operation. I was hesitant because I really wanted to see Ken. That was something we'd been trying to do for a while, but it was also, it's the second day of the first week after Labor Day, and can I afford to take 2 hours? And eventually I'm like, yeah, you know what? First of all, Ken's worth it. Love you, Ken. But also, what are the odds anything's going to happen in the next 2 hours? I can probably sneak out and get downtown and meet Ken and get back. And I'll be back before the wife gets back from work, before the kids get home from school.
Famous
what are the odds anything happens
of
today?
The newspaper man. The cursed.
I was in the goddamn taxi heading down when all hell broke loose. And I had heard whispers that the confidence and supply agreement was over, but none of them had been as in today or within the next hour as it ended up being. You and I have both written columns about this week. I don't know if there's a ton more either of us needs to say.
Well, but let's assume that our audience hasn't necessarily read our columns and summarize what were our position on this one, because as you were hearing rumors and whispers that CASA was coming to an end, I was hearing rumors and whispers that this was all just a political stunt and that essentially what Singh was going to be announcing was we're going to end CASA, but we'll still kind of sort of vote with the government on a case-by-case basis. Which would effectively mean that you're still in CASA. If you're not willing to vote against the government on a confidence motion, then you're effectively still propping up the government. You're in a supply and management agreement in all but name. So the rumor that I was hearing was that this is all a political stunt. Singh is still going to continue to support Justin up until October of 2025. He literally cannot afford an election. The NDP's books are desolate. Also, the other thing that I think Max Fawcett from the National Observer brought up, which I thought was a good point, was that there are 2 provincial elections either ongoing or imminent. Like Singh can't afford the staffing. Like the volunteers aren't there to move to a federal election. So he's going to make this big announcement. He's going to make it ahead of 2 major by-elections, one of which is pretty significant for the NDP, and he's doing it ahead of an internal NDP caucus meeting, right? So the idea was this was all an internal stunt in order to generate some momentum for the by-elections and make sure that he had a relatively smooth caucus meeting, but it effectively doesn't change anything. So that was what I was hearing from my end. You were hearing from your end, and then Singh comes out and does this Twitter announcement where he's like, "We're ripping up the CASA," and like, and he gives this very campaign style video, like, "We're ready to go to war now." And I'm sitting going like, Singh, you can't come out, say you're ripping up the CASA, and we can no longer support this terrible government that's going to side with corporations. Which, let's have a conversation about that out of date messaging, but that's another conversation. And then like go vote in favor of successive confidence motions continuing to prop up the government. Like, what are you thinking here? This doesn't actually make good political strategic sense. Especially considering if you think that the Conservatives are not going to be passing a confidence motion like every week from now until the next election in order to make a point to humiliate Singh personally and make a point about how this guy's completely full of shit, frankly. And because it benefits them to demonstrate that Singh doesn't actually say what he means. And like, look, we're actually the better selection if you're a working class Canadian because this Muppet is full of it. I don't know why Singh is setting himself up for this. I don't know why he's setting himself up to basically be repeatedly humiliated every week that Parliament's in session from now until the end of the government.
When I was a young man, friends of mine who had been a romantic couple for a number of years broke up, and it was a surprise. We all kind of thought they'd be forever, and it was sad. It was a really sad thing for everybody. And then it became confusing because despite having broken up, they continued to hang out regularly and sleep together. And that went on for a while. And I began to kind of say to my buddy, like, can you tell me what breaking up means
to you?
And they were both adamant that it was over. And then I'd like pop by his place and she'd be there already. And had clearly been there overnight. Mm-hmm. And again, no judgment. I wanted them to be together. It was convenient. I like them as a couple. I don't know how the NDP is going to navigate ripping up the CASA and then repeatedly voting with the government on confidence measures. I don't know how they're going to make it stick. You, in your column on Friday, I think you wrote about that at length. I think you're bang on. I think viewers and listeners may be surprised to know that Jen and I don't always agree with each other in our columns. That's not what we do here. Like, the purpose of the line is not to get Jen and I to a consensus position on everything. We read each other's stuff to make sure there's not typos and it's not libelous. That's what editing means. I don't edit Jen into agreement with me and vice versa. But I would co-sign every word of your column on Friday. Every word of it. I agree with it completely. I don't know how they're going to do it. I don't know how they're going to do it, particularly as the Conservatives jump on them and ruthlessly exploit this.
Which, by the way, they have to do. Strategically speaking, they have to. You've given them a giant pie and a fork. They're going to eat the pie.
Like, the only thing that might give the NDP a fighting chance here, and this was the theme of my column on Thursday, was that Mr. Singh spent 2.5 years humiliating himself. And, if I want to lay out 3 things Mr. Singh could have done as leader of the NDP after the last election. Go for a full coalition. to have a progressive coalition, get NDP members into the cabinet, an actual coalition agreement. On the other extreme, there was the option of no official cooperation, but tough, hard-nosed bargaining ahead of every confidence vote to wring maximum political concessions out of the Liberals. Mr.
Which
Singh
again,
tried
that
to
option only works if you're actually ready to fight an election, though.
I know.
Like you can't, otherwise they just call your bluff, which is what the Trudeau Liberals have been doing for the last 3 years.
And I think rather than make peace with that, what Mr. Singh tried to do, it was, my headline column, I quipped that I support his right to terminate his half pregnancy. He wanted to be not quite in and not quite out, not quite for Mr. Trudeau, not quite against him. He wanted all the benefits of a stable signed agreement with predetermined deliverables on a pre-agreed schedule, while also being a fully autonomous opposition party. It was a complete fiction that only served, I have to imagine, either some, and I say this with no disrespect intended for Mr. Singh, but either degree of personal emotional vanity. Like he couldn't tolerate being seen in public to be the junior partner, so he had to keep this ridiculous fiction. Or it was, in my another possible explanation, a failed political calculation by the NDP.
It was a failed political calculation, plus it was a poor negotiation. Because if he were actually a coalition partner, he should have been able to negotiate things like cabinet seats for NDP party members and things of that nature. So just poor tactics, poor negotiation skills. And the other real problem is that the way that what the NDP agreed to set up such a situation where all of the concessions that the NDP managed to win on pharmacare and dental and school lunches or whatever you want to call it, as thin as those concessions actually were, and they're very thin, the Liberals are just going to take credit for that. The NDP is not going to successfully manage to get credit for that in the eyes of the public. And then the flip side, the trade-off for supporting and propping up the Liberal government as it stands is that Singh neuters himself as an effective critic of the Liberal government, because you can't go in one say and say, this government is out of touch and in line with corporate elites, and then vote for them again on a confidence motion with any credibility. And that is and like I think that the Conservatives, in part of the reason why they're doing as well as the polls is that a lot of people who are working class, blue collar, and even union are looking at the NDP going like, you can't. This doesn't actually. You're not an effective opposition. You're not opposing the government. You're not actually standing up for an interest. You can talk a good game, but it doesn't mean anything if you're continuing to prop them up year after year. So I think the strategy on Singh's side was, well, if I just say I'm ripping up the agreement, then therefore I'm no longer going to be tied down. I can continue to be a more effective critic of the current government, and maybe I'll get more negotiation power, more leverage ahead of every confidence vote. The problem is,
yes, but it's deeper than that, right? Because it's also, if for 2.5 years, if I say I'm an opposition politician, maybe the public will believe it, even though I have a signed written agreement with the government.
Right. But now he's in no better position. He has no additional leverage post CASA that he had pre CASA. He's going to lose all the leverage ahead of every confidence motion because the Conservatives are going to just keep on throwing the confidence motions one after the other. And secondly, he fundamentally has the same problem post CASA that he had pre CASA, and that is he can't call the government's, or like everyone can call his bluff. He's not election ready, and everybody knows it. So at the end of the day, you're going to cave. And if you're going to cave, then you have no leverage. So like, I just maybe think that maybe Jagmeet Singh is not good at politics. I think maybe he's not good at that.
First of all, yes. Like I said, I endorse every word of your column, including that banger of a sentence, which I made the subhead of your column because I thought it was perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing is, there was a way for Singh to do a CASA that was not humiliating. And I don't know if it could
become a full coalition partner.
Or even just go, you know what, we're gonna hold our noses and we're gonna keep these guys in office for a couple of years. And when asked about publicly, he could have gone, yeah, I hate it. I hate dealing with these guys. But the reality of it is, this is what the voters wanted. This is the parliament we have. We're operating in the real world, and we think we can get some good done here. Instead, he had to do tough talk, Justin Trudeau siding with grocery oligarchs.
Yeah.
There was I don't know if a better politician could have done better than Mr. Singh, but I think we've all discovered that Mr. Singh is not a good politician.
Well, the other option that was on the table for him that might have been effective is that he gets rid of the pretense of being an opposition leader altogether and simply becomes a full coalition partner, demands a proportional number of cabinet seats at the table, and then he begins the process of eating the Liberal Party, right? Like he sets himself up to be the center-left party once the Liberal Party essentially goes down in flames in the next election, right? Like that would have been the way to take over from within, but that would have required a high degree of political deftness and internal management that I'm not sure Singh actually possesses. But I mean, I can't speak to that. So look, I want to talk about what happens here, because I mean, I think a lot of listeners here, I've broken up CASA, they're thinking there's going to be an election. Like there has to be an election imminently.
Unlikely.
And I'm sorry to disappoint you, but that does not necessarily mean what that means.
Yeah.
So there are three options I think that are on the table going forward, and I don't know which of these three are going to be the case. But the first option is that what we're going to have is a snap fall election, that the Justin Trudeau Liberals say, shit, getting anything through Parliament in this scenario is going to become a clown show. And actually, I think this is the smartest strategic decision for the Liberals. The Liberals actually should recognize that they can't win the next election. They're not going to be able to win it again in a year. So their best option here is to eat the NDP. Eat the NDP, live to survive another day. If you drop the writ tomorrow, next week, and you call a snap election, you know the NDP is not prepared for a fight. You're probably in a better position than they are, at least marginally. Call their bluff, eat the left, and basically collapse the existing NDP under your tent. And if you drop the writ like tomorrow, you can potentially eke out some kind of credible opposition position there. That is, honestly, if I were on the Liberal strategy side, I'd Leroy Jenkins this, and that's just what I would do. I don't think that that's what they're going to do. The second option,
Jenkins reference. I love it.
Yeah, the second option, but I mean, everybody knows that I'm Leroy Jenkins. I'm like high risk, high reward. Let's play. That's just my personality. I don't think that they're that. I think they're more risk averse than that. The other rumor that both you and I were hearing yesterday was that there was some chatter about prorogation. So this would be maybe the Liberals come back for 1 or 2 days. Parliament's an absolute clown show. The Conservatives fail to pass some kind of confidence motion. You see Justin Trudeau give a press conference all strum and drang and say, there's no possible way that we can function in a parliament in this situation with bad faith Conservatives running Conservative motions and the NDP refusing to put the needs of Canadians first through their anti-progressive whatever politics agenda. And he'll throw a big show about it. And he says, we have no choice but to prorogue Parliament to regather our strength and consider how best to serve Canadians. Something like that, right? And then he pulls a full Stephen Harper, basically stalls out Parliament. And legally speaking, I think the real question is there's two questions on if he goes that route. One, how long can he prorogue Parliament legally? And the second question is, how long can he prorogue Parliament without there being riots in the streets? Right?
I think, and with not absolute certainty, I think he has some runway on the legally side, and it's a matter of money. It is how long is the government funded, and my understanding is that it's funded
until March
for about 6 months. Yeah, so there's some runway there.
There's some runway. So legally he can do it, except this gets even more complicated because if you will remember during COVID, the government was able to extend supply without sitting. So, I mean, hypothetically, could they prorogue Parliament until next year, until October of 2025, if they use that same mechanism to extend supply as an order in council? I think it was an order in council.
I don't know if they can. I don't know that they can. I don't know the details in it.
In fact, to be honest with you, I think nobody knows how long they can. So I think people internally are trying to figure that out. Like, how long could they hypothetically prorogue Parliament? Could they prorogue it for a year? Legally, I'm not sure that they can't. But I think the less legally dubious method would be to prorogue it until basically the government budget runs out, which would be the next budget in spring, which would then force the government to come back. Once you prorogue government, you have to have a throne speech. A throne speech is always a confidence motion, and also a budget is also a confidence motion. So, I mean, the most likely option at this point is probably if he goes that route, is something resembling a spring election, which is about, honestly, what I was expecting prior. I thought that the idea that we could go to past spring after the last couple of months was unlikely. So a spring election is probably the safest bet.
I'm amazed we've made it this far.
I'm amazed we made it. Like the parliament was starting to decay and dysfunction into really absurd shit like May of last year, right? So the idea that they could maintain this for another year was pretty risible. But speaking of, that's the third option. The third option is that Trudeau just calls the bluff and brazens it out. Says, no, we're going to continue to take this until the government falls, and forces Singh to eat his dramatic announcement. And they just carry on as if all's the same until October 2025. I don't know where the money's going to land on this one. I can't totally rule out a snap election because, again, from my perspective, that's actually the best bet for the Liberals right here. Mm-hmm. I can't rule out some kind of really messy prorogation. But I will point out that even if they try to prorogue Parliament until spring, like that's a 6-month prorogation, I can't see people putting up with that without, at a minimum, very significant protests and maybe very, very serious protests. I think that's a very high-risk move. But that's another conversation. And I also can't rule out the possibility that Trudeau just brazens it out and keeps trucking along until next year.
Here's my reaction to a couple points on that front. First of all, I've already mentioned a major departure from the PMO. Jeremy Broadhurst has left. Probably not a name that is known to all Canadians, but he was a senior Trudeau advisor, a longtime serving member of the government in senior levels. And he was the man who was intending to run the Liberal re-election campaign. Mm-hmm. So in terms of Liberal election readiness, I suspect they're in better shape than the NDP, but they need a campaign manager, and that ain't an easy job to fill. So that's something they're going to have to figure out. On all the other issues you've raised, I don't know how long they can sustain it either. I don't know what machinations they could come up with. I honestly don't. But I have a couple of comments I'm going to make. One, the Conservatives are going to pivot now. Their target is no longer the government. Their target is the Bloc and the NDP. They are going to begin hammering both parties to try and shame them both into bringing down the government at the first possible opportunity. And they need both. The Conservatives need both the NDP and the Bloc on board to bring down the government. The government has a strong enough minority that it's in a pretty good position. You need both opposition, tertiary opposition parties to join with the Conservatives to bring down the government. The Conservative goal from here on until whenever the election is eventually called is to figure out the most vulnerable NDP and Bloc MPs and park RVs outside their houses and blare in both official languages basically a speech going, are you guys too chicken to bring down Justin Trudeau? The Conservatives have to go after the Bloc and the NDP here. I agree with something you said a few minutes ago. The Conservatives are going to make the lunch menu at the House of Commons cafeteria. They're going to make that a confidence motion from every day from now until eternity.
It's right there. Right there. They have to.
Remember the debt clock? The truck with the clock on it? Yeah. The Conservatives should get a clock going of every time Singh from here on now keeps the government in power. And that's, I think, or something like that, and they'll do it. The other big picture comment I want to make, though, and it's not that I disagree with anything you've said. I think you're right. But there is a fourth factor here. You laid out 3 scenarios to an election here. I want to lay out a fourth.
Okay.
Chaos. CASA was stabilizing. It's not anymore. And I'm wondering if a scandal breaks or someone has a bad tweet or a really weird poll comes out, or there's a mutiny in the Liberal caucus over CASA or Dentacare or something, and then we find ourselves in an election. I mean, the Conservatives want one as soon as possible, and they're ready to go. But I wonder if some idiot is going to have a temper tantrum or an ego meltdown or something like that. And then, oops, 41 million people are going to the polls. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not predicting that. Westminster systems are generally fairly stable. There's a lot of checks and balances, but it's not impossible to me that Mr. Singh, Mr. Trudeau, and Mr. Blanchet do not want an election, and we end up having one because they paint themselves into a corner where either political imperatives or ego do not allow them back out of it. So who benefits in that situation? The Conservatives, obviously. But I agree with what you said a minute ago. The Liberals have an opportunity here if they're vicious enough and if they're mercenary enough. And these are things the Liberal Party of Canada has a proven track record of being willing to do and being willing to be. The NDP has got to realize that they are rocking a hard place right now. The Conservatives are going to put maximum pressure to humiliate Singh into bringing the government down. And Justin Trudeau has now a strategic existential imperative to destroy what's left of the NDP to try and save himself. I am glad, I wrote this in my column, I am glad for Jagmeet Singh that he has escaped the ridiculous fiction of being both in and out of government. It was humiliating. He never figured out how to navigate that. We talked about this a couple podcasts ago. He was getting community noted on Twitter because his bullshit was so transparently stupid. So I'm glad for him that he's been freed from that. But he's just traded one problem for two problems now. Conservatives on the right of him and Liberals on the left. Enjoy.
The other thing I would just add to sum up this particular segment is the chaos option is option 3. Like, to me, if the Liberals don't prorogue, they just decide to brazen it out to October of next year, the odds that something's going to go really pear-shaped are near unity. There's no way that they can manage another year of parliament, another parliamentary session, without things getting really weird. Because things were getting really weird.
They're already weird.
Yeah, they were already weird. So, I mean, maximum chaos is option 3. I mean, as journalists, we're here for all of it. Like, every single one of these options is a gift for us, right? Like,
every day is a gift.
Every day is a gift. Like, oh, snap election? Bring it on. There's no, like, the growth in the line is meteoric. Well, the second you were to drop that red, I love it. You know, oh, you want to prorogue and risk, like, riots in the streets for 6 months? We're here for it, man. That's great. Oh, you want to, like, maximize the odds of weirdness and chaos in Parliament as you try and drag this Parliament out for another year? Cool. Like, I am strapped in. I'm here no matter what. So, no, I mean, from our perspective, all of this is great fun.
Yeah, we're having so much fun.
We're having fun.
In my eyes.
We're having fun. Anyway, on that note, like and subscribe The Line and check out our written columns and dispatches if you haven't already. www.readtheline.ca. That's www.readtheline.ca.
And you too can have fun like Jen and I are having fun.
So much fun.
Like and subscribe.
This episode of The Line has been brought to you by Unsmoke Canada, which is dedicated to helping Canadians who are looking to quit smoking understand the full range of options available. Despite decades of government programs and regulations, today nearly 5 million Canadian adults smoke cigarettes. Adult smokers who choose to continue to smoke should be aware that other options exist. Right now, accessing information about these options is heavily restricted in Canada. While not risk-free, alternatives such as heated tobacco and vaping products provide a potentially less harmful choice than cigarettes. Cigarettes burn tobacco, resulting in smoke that contains 6,000 harmful chemicals that are associated with smoking-related disease and death. Heating tobacco and vaping products have the potential to significantly reduce this risk. Health agencies around the world are now considering these alternatives to help end smoking. Updated laws can help adult smokers better understand the full range of options available, including the relative risk of these products. Millions of Canadians smoke cigarettes. Technology exists that can help change that, but policymakers need to take action. Learn about how a smoke-free future can be achieved at unsmoke.ca.
So that. Big news in the world of conservative media this week. Considerable news. Huge news. For those who maybe have not been following, it looks like the Department of Justice has launched an indictment against organization called Tenet Media, which has become sort of an umbrella company where a lot have
Sorry, Jen, this
well-known.
is the American Department of Justice.
The American Department of Justice. Yes, we're talking about American politics here. Have launched an indictment against Tenet Media, which has become an umbrella company where a lot of fairly well-known right-wing conservative commentators have landed. I have notes here, people like Lauren Southern, Tim Pool, Taylor Hansen, Matt Christensen, Dave Rubin, and Benny Johnson. I'm sure anybody who's watching us, our little tiny piddling YouTube channel online, will undoubtedly have been fed some of the algorithms that will have led them into some of these spheres as well. So the allegations, and again, we were going to make a very careful point of noting that these are allegations that have not been proven in court. But the allegations are essentially that this company took $10 million from what was essentially the Russian government in order to fund alternative perspectives in the media that turned out to be sort of innately tied with Russian information campaigns, right? The growth in the right-wing media in, I would say, commentary that supports the Russian claims and Russian invasion in Ukraine would have set people like us off that something like this might have been happening some time ago. And it looks like if you read through the indictment, the DOJ has some pretty compelling and damning evidence that
they got the goods.
They got the goods. They got the goods. Now, the actual individuals and commentators in question are almost uniformly coming out publicly saying we were victims in this. We were hired by what we thought was a legitimate company. And we didn't know where the money came from. It just was a coincidence that we happened to take the Russian line on so many things involving Ukraine. Personally, my opinion, and again, none of these allegations have been proven in court of law, but in some cases that might be credible. In other cases, I think that might not be credible. And I will allow the legal process to play itself out accordingly. I'm sorry, I'm just about to cough here. Matt, could you take over while I cough?
Well, yes, I certainly can. And Jen, I'm going to throw an obscure one at you. This is the benefits of a long political memory. Do you remember Neil Bush?
No, I do not remember Neil Bush.
The lesser-known brother of George W. and Jeb. Mm-hmm. And Neil Bush ended up getting into some kind of trouble a number of years ago. And I'm actually just quickly scanning the news story because I don't want to defame the guy. But there was this incredible story of where he had, during a divorce, basically there were a situation where with, let me read you the quote. This is from a CNN article.
All right. Sure.
And there had been some suggestions of business impropriety. And this is me reading directly from the CNN article. The women, he said, simply knocked on the door of his hotel room, entered, and had sex with him. He did not know if they were prostitutes because they never asked for money and he did not pay them. Mr. Bush, you have to admit that it's a pretty remarkable thing for a man to just go to a hotel room and open the door and have a woman staying there and have sex with her. It was very unusual, Mr. Bush agreed. I think what we're finding out is that significant segments...
That's a great story.
I love the quote. It was very unusual.
It's a very unusual.
So I think what we're finding out is that a significant segment of what we could say was the alternative or perhaps the far right. I'm not going to get wedded to either term there. People will want to nickel and dime me.
We've talked about the problems with the term the far right and how non-specific that is. But
non-conventional voices in the U.S. media ecosystem on the right.
There you go.
I think a lot of them were staggeringly incurious about why, metaphorically speaking, women were just randomly showing up at their hotel rooms to have sex with them.
Yes, women randomly showing up at their hotel rooms to have sex with them who didn't want equity stakes in the businesses that they were running.
So, Jen, if you'll indulge me here just for a moment, like I've read the affidavit and the indictment release. I didn't read the whole affidavit. It's like 300 pages long, but I slammed through it. What basically is being alleged by the FBI and the Department of Justice is that these alternative voices within the conservative media ecosystem, and Jen, to your point, pro-Russia, anti-Western aid to Ukraine, and also very much in line with sort of the U.S. is in chaos and the White House is ruining it. This Tenet media company approach them, sign them to huge, well beyond market rate contracts.
Yeah.
And then these guys took the money and apparently were very incurious about who these investors were. It appears that there were a few pro forma questions asked. They were told, well, there's an ideologically motivated private investor who really wants to get your podcast out to the masses. And no, it was a Russian government cutout, allegedly. So,
Matt, there are 3 points that I think that are to be made, not getting into specifics, because as we said, a legal process needs to play out here, and the facts shall be revealed
watch it with interest.
in the process of that legal process. But there are 3 things that I would like to bring up. One,
please.
I would like to read you this quote from one of the media personalities, Mr. Tim Poole, and I would like your reaction to it.
Okay, is it as good as it was very unusual to the women showing up at the hotel room door?
It's pretty good.
Okay.
So I would notice the smarter individuals in this list have shut the fuck up. Not
I have noticed.
Not all people have shut the fuck up.
Some media personalities have gone completely silent since this was announced.
And some media personalities have done the opposite of becoming completely silent. One of them was Mr. Tim Poole, who is tweeting under his name Timcast. This is his quote, and this is from September 5th, so yesterday. We're filming this on the 6th, at 3:59 p.m. my time, I'm presuming. Quote, I have been contacted by the FBI as a potential victim of a crime. The FBI believes I have information relevant to an ongoing criminal investigation and have requested a voluntary interview. I will be offering my assistance in this matter. Matt.
Two reactions.
Okay.
If your best line of defense is that I did not realize I was taking wildly above market rate fees for services that just happened to link back to Russian intelligence, that should, in a just world, cause people to reevaluate how seriously they take you. The other thing I would say is that I would advise Mr. Poole, in the spirit of just complete generosity, I would urge him to have a lawyer accompany him to any meetings he attends. And Jen, as funny as this is going to sound, it's 100% possible that he is a patsy, that he was duped. Mm-hmm. I just hope he's smart enough to bring a lawyer with him, because I believe Mr. Poole has revealed himself in some ways, and I'm only basing this on what is contained in the affidavit. He may have a blind spot or two. He may have gaps in knowledge that he might wish to have, and a lawyer, in exchange for money, might be willing to help fill some of those gaps in ways that may be to Mr. Poole's benefit.
Okay, so can I speak of this in a very global sense? Very global sense. And this is highly rooted in the book that I'm hopefully going to finish sometime in my lifetime, about miscarriages of U.S. justice and such. This has required me to spend a lot of time going through, for example, interrogation techniques that police use in order to elicit confessions from people who may or may not be guilty.
Also useful in podcasting, but go on.
Very useful in podcasting. And from my research in this regard, there's one thing that a real conclusion that I've come away from, and I realize I'm going to annoy some listeners in our podcast when I say this. Don't fucking talk to cops. Don't fucking talk to cops without your lawyer present. It doesn't matter if you're guilty or innocent. It doesn't matter if you think you're guilty or innocent. Cops do not exist to procure the absolute truth. Cops exist to procure prosecutions.
To close cases.
They work to their incentives, and their incentives are to get clearance rates and to close cases. If you are being asked to engage in a voluntary interview, and you're assuming that you're going into that voluntary interview as an innocent victim, and you choose to go into that voluntary interview without a lawyer present, you're a dumbass.
I don't you've been researching interrogation techniques more than I have. I'm by no means an expert in them, but I do know one thing that I think is widely understood by anyone who knows anything about interrogation techniques. The pop culture seems to believe that torture or enhanced interrogation techniques, or whatever you want to call it, is a guaranteed path to the information you want, where any professional interrogator will tell you a cup of coffee, a sandwich, and a modicum of sympathy is how you crack people open like a peanut shell. One of the things you do is you tell them, "Oh dear, you're the victim here."
I think you're the victim here.
It's just how did this happen, Tim?
I think that if I were in the FBI's shoes right now and I were looking for the weakest link, let's just say Twitter would be a real handy psychological tool for me right now.
Can I make a different point? Or
I'm going to move on to my second point. Please. But is it related to the first point? Okay. The second point that I'm going to make here has to do with the far right, the right-wing media ecosphere more generally, and the types of people who get really sucked into that ecosphere, that information ecosphere. That particular informational niche, okay? And we know that we have some overlap in terms of the people who listen to our podcast and the people who will listen to some of these podcasts. So I'm not saying this with disrespect. I think that you should be taking in a really wide range of opinions and perspectives from the left, from the right, from people you agree with, from people you disagree with. I don't necessarily have a problem with people getting information from RT or organizations that we know are affiliated with a particular government's line. I think it's good to understand when people go out and get that information. For example, when Tucker Carlson went and did the interview with Putin, I think that was embarrassing for Tucker, but I'm also not going to pretend that we didn't get useful information about Putin's state of mind as a result of that information. So putting information into your brain is not a problem, okay? And I also don't really have a problem with people being skeptical of the mainstream media. I'm from the mainstream media. You and I are both pedigreed member of the mainstream media. But I operate from a position of you shouldn't trust the media. You shouldn't trust anybody. You should use skepticism in your consumption of the mainstream media. When you read the CBC, you should do additional research if you care about the topic. You shouldn't take what Matt Gurney and Jen Gerson are telling you at face value, because all of this information is being filtered through human brains, and we are fallible creatures and we have blind spots, right? So you should challenge us, and you shouldn't necessarily take what we're saying at face value. You should do your own research and see what's going on. So I have no problem with that. The problem I do have is when people go off and say the CBC is lying to us, it's all part of a left-wing agenda, but Russell Brand's got the real fucking goods. Yeah. Or Lauren Southern or Tim Pool, they're giving me the straight hard facts. Firstly, if the media ecosystem that you've cultivated for yourself, if the people you're talking to and listening to don't make you disagree sometimes, that's a problem. That's a sign that something's unhealthy. If you're consuming good faith people, you should disagree with them sometimes. And secondly, you should be applying the same critical media lens and critical media filter that you apply to the Toronto Star and the Globe and Mail and the CBC. By all means, subject those things to scrutiny. But if you're going to do that, then also subject the shit you're seeing on YouTube to the same level of scrutiny. You have to use the same skills. You cannot just turn off that skepticism meter the second that you are listening to someone who's passionately telling you something that speaks to your soul, right?
This is basic psychology, Jen. We are skeptical as a default position to things that we don't agree with, and we are trusting as a default position to things we do agree with.
That's right. And I think that one of my major issues with what's happening with the media ecosystem right now is that people are losing that they're being correctly skeptical of the mainstream media. It's good to be skeptical, correct to be skeptical of the legacy media because they still hold a whole amount of power. But then they're failing to apply those same skills a lot of the time to these other people. And I think that this brings me to my last point, and that is I do think that this DOJ indictment, especially as it pulls through the system, and I think as it expands, which I suspect it probably will, is really going to force people to challenge their biases and assumptions and ask themselves whether or not they've been consuming information from people who weren't, in fact, operating in good faith just because they were alternative voices.
It should, but it won't.
I'm actually not sure about that. I think that this one is really opening some people's eyes up. I really do think it's going to open up some eyes.
You know what? Let me tell you why I disagree. And this was actually one of the 2 points I was going to make, but I'll advance it right now into a rebuttal.
Okay.
This is going to sound like I'm trying to whitewash what's been happening on the right, because I'm a conservative too, and I know that. But what I have been struck by, and I'm looking at a lot of people on the left right now, reasonable people, reasonable, moderate center lefties, who have known in their heart of hearts that Russia is torquing the right-wing information ecosystem, and they're validated. These FBI documents, these Department of Justice documents prove them right. I don't get the first fucking clue that a single one of these people is wondering which one of their favorite center-left or progressive media personalities is also cashing checks from someone who may prove to be suspect. Because one of the things I don't think people understand is that Russia's goal, and the goal of foreign interference broadly, is not necessarily the victory of any particular party or candidate. It may be in a certain context.
Yeah.
Their goal is division and chaos. Mm-hmm. And they are 100% playing us from both ends. Mm-hmm. The best thing that can happen for Russia is not a dominant right-wing strategic victory in the United States. It is a left-wing and a right-wing that is so amped up and mutually antagonistic that it becomes impossible for the U.S. to do a fucking thing. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I was talking just with a buddy about this yesterday, and I know, again, I don't want to sound like I'm whitewashing any of this. I 100% believe, and we shall see how the court proceedings play out, but I 100% believe that there are members of the right-wing media ecosystem who are, witting or otherwise, on the payroll of foreign intelligence agencies in the advancing of those foreign countries' national security objectives against ours. Some of them are probably taking the money and turning a blind eye. Some of them are probably just dupes. I 100% accept that. But I don't think people realize that we are undoubtedly looking in North America and the Western world broadly, left-wing movements also receiving this money.
Yeah.
Through different proxies, different cutouts, not with a goal to help this or that or the other guy win, but to have chaos and mutual antagonism. So,
well, I don't want to fall into the too cocaine trap. I mean, the stuff on Russia has been pretty egregiously obvious. Like it's not subtle.
No.
Right.
Nope.
So no, I mean, yeah, I hope that investigations into influence operations don't end with the obvious stuff, but this was low hanging fruit, man.
Oh no, I know. No, and what to your previous point, one of the things, and it was Tom Nichols who wrote a great piece in the Atlantic about this already. I read it this morning. One of the things you have to understand is that all of us have been conditioned by Bond movies to think that intelligence is like this incredible battle of wits between supersized brains. Whereas in fact, most of the people involved in this stuff are pretty fucking stupid. Mm-hmm. And they're easily duped with small inducements because they're petty people who are easily misled.
Or they're just insecure, or I think part of the challenge of any kind of intelligence work is trying to understand the psychology of the people you're working with, and you'd be shocked by how cheaply people can be bought sometimes.
People have sold out their countries for decades for like $400,000 total.
Yeah.
You couldn't even buy a Toronto condo for what people go down for treason with. The other big point, Jen, I would make, and this is, I was just going to say, you and I have spoken about this before, because in the context of foreign interference, well, we've talked in this country often of China and Iran, Middle East, Russia, India, probably friendly countries are running interference operations or influence operations in Canada.
If you think you're being naive if you think that the U.S. isn't operating its own interest in certain ways, and to some extent that's fine, especially if it's an allied country and they're just sort of engaging in the democratic process of their own interest. Get a gray area.
There is a gray area between an influence operation and a PR campaign. And your
that's right. That's a good way of saying it.
But what I'm going to say is that you and I have said more than once on this very podcast that if we really had an exhaustive look at foreign interference in Canada, there would be colleagues of ours who would be genuinely shocked and appalled to realize they got played. And I've told the story before about how in the comms sector, one of the things I discovered is that media training or op-ed ghostwriting or speech ghostwriting, there are fairly predictable market rates for this stuff. And about a decade ago, people were telling me, if you go work for one of the Chinese state-owned enterprises, you're getting paid 10 times market rate. And a lot of Canadians would have taken the money, and probably, by the way, was nothing illegal about that. And there was not necessarily anything unethical about that, except it made them a little bit complicit. Because when you cash that first check.
And also, Matt, to be perfectly, I don't want to actually says, hubris comes before the fall here. I don't want to rule out the possibility that we've been duped at some point.
I assume I have been.
I'm a journalist. I talk to people. People come to me. They try to sell me stories, or they sell me lines on things, or they try to persuade me on things, and that's trying to wade out the muck from the not muck is part of my job, and I do the best that I can with it. But can I be 100% confident that over the nearly 20 years I've been a journalist, that some source that I've spoken to and quoted wasn't actually intelligence and wasn't playing me for a line?
Or even more benignly, that we've been spun by political operatives.
Or that we've been spun. I'm sure we've been spun before. Absolutely. So, I mean, there's a lot of gray zone here, which is not meant to. I'm not making that comment in order to whitewash what we're seeing here. I think that the allegations, as they've been laid out by the American Department of Justice, go beyond gray zone spinning, and well beyond gray zone spinning.
The allegations are quite spectacular.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think we would have fallen for that. Just like that up front.
You know what?
But I don't rule out the possibility that we have been spun ourselves over the course of our careers, because that's sort of how these influence operations operate, right? So I don't want to be the person who casts stones and says that we're completely innocent and have never been fooled. I mean, of course, we probably have been in the past, and this goes back to my original point. We're humans. We have blind spots. We have biases. You should absolutely subject what we say to scrutiny, but so should you subject everyone that you are dealing with and everybody in your information sphere to scrutiny. That is just part of the responsibility of being a citizen in a society.
If you hold CBS News and Russell Brand on wildly different standards of credibility in Mr. Brand's favor, you're an idiot.
Yeah.
And, honestly, Jen, I'm 100% with you. We are an advertiser and subscriber based business. One of the things we did as a matter of corporate policy, and I'm glad we did this, you and I years ago drew some red lines around partnerships we were not willing to take. Large anonymous donations from wealthy philanthropists. Nope. We decided we weren't going to do it. Mm-mm. And look, I love the idea of some billionaire showing up and handing me a ton of money and I can fuck off. But
I mean, if somebody were to be engaged in an investor in the line or whatever, that would be great, but we're going to be honest about it and we're going to be upfront about that.
And we're going to do our due diligence to figure out who the hell it is.
Yeah, we're going to do our due diligence on it as well. If someone were to come up and say, I am whatever, we're going to do our due diligence on the individual. We're going to do our due diligence on the company, and we're going to disclose it. There's no.
But it's going to be secret. We're going to pay you 10 times the market rate. No, that's suspicious.
That's sus. Anyway,
what's that mean? Don't be suspicious. Don't be suspicious. Yeah.
Don't be suspicious. Don't be suspicious.
So
on that
here's
note,
my guess.
Here's our pitch. Because we don't have an anonymous investor from Western Europe lined up to pay our bills, do consider liking and subscribing at www.readtheline.ca. That's www.readtheline.ca. It looks like we are heading into an absolutely spectacular season of Canadian politics. So if this is your jam, please keep a roof over our heads, and keep us from having to be suspect.
Vulnerable to exploitation. No, honestly, Jen, I'll say this. I echo everything you just said there. Obviously, like and subscribe. That's what we do this for. But let me just say, my gut feeling is that we will find out more about this, and it will keep going, and it will absolutely spread to Canada, and it's absolutely going to take down figures on the right wing. And I am not going to be surprised when that happens. But I do think eventually activists, or I think on the left wing, it will be less media figures and more activists.
Yeah.
That's where I think the money has gone.
Yeah.
But I think this notion that the money is not, a lot of money is sloshed around in this country the last couple of years. And I don't think we can account for where a lot of it came from. And you know why, Jen? Because we're stupid. As a country, we have
Also
no
true.
defenses against this kind of thing.
Stupid and complacent.
We have, it's the old saying, right? Our expectations are a problem. I don't think a lot of people had that ingrained skepticism of wondering where the money was coming from and why. So, like and subscribe.
Matt, you and I had the recorder off while we went on a really dark internal rant about how we're losing faith in everything about our country. We really should have recorded that.
I went to go refill my mug and I came back and it's like, let's get existential.
Yeah, and that's what happened. We should have had the mic on for that because I think our audience would have recorded it. But I think we're going to follow that mood into a discussion about the Green Line in Calgary. Matt, you're in Toronto. Can you tell me what you know about the Calgary Green Line?
I know that it's a proposed LRT project that I believe was championed by the last provincial government and is now either canceled or delayed or revised. Honestly, that's like, I know headline level stuff.
Yeah. So basically, I'm not going to get into great...
Is that basically right?
Yeah, that's more or less correct. So I'm not going to get into super great details about the Green Line, except for to say that if you want to see yet another example of why this country can't build things anymore, you pretty much just need to look at the Green Line. So this was a line that, again, I'm not going to get into the specific details about what the budget was and whatever, but it was originally meant to go from like downtown Calgary up into the northwest, which is a whole area of the city that isn't really serviced by an LRT. We actually have a great LRT here in Calgary. I think it's actually wind powered. It's smartly laid out, what we do have of it, and it's actually very well ridden. I think we have actually one of the highest ridership rates of that LRT in a lot of Canadian cities. And the way that it's structured is smart because, I mean, Calgary's a very suburban city, so we've got lots of expanded suburbs. I mean, we live in a prairie, so there's lots of land. And a lot of people will take their cars, they'll drive to free park and rides. They'll get on the LRT. They get on the LRT for $3. You get a ride into downtown, way cheaper than parking downtown and easier to find parking. And people will commute out. Now, some changes have happened in recent years where there are fewer and fewer jobs concentrated in the downtown core, and we're starting to see sort of a dispersion of job opportunities outside of the downtown core, which challenges this idea of a spoke and hub style LRT system. But regardless, I don't think there's any dispute that an LRT up through northern Calgary, and particularly an LRT that is connecting to the airport, is something that we actually really need and have needed for 10 years. So many years ago, the proposal for the LRT line is put forth. It looks magnificent. It looks like it would just connect huge swathes of the city. Absolutely necessary. Budget was put forward. I think one of the major challenges of it is that it required quite a significant amount of underground tunneling into the downtown. So this gets into the whole idea that, we need more subways rather than LRTs in Calgary. But of course, as Toronto knows, tunneling costs a lot of money. Yeah. And the process of getting funding for this LRT took a really long time. As more time went on, the inflation went up, the budget started to go up. You needed more funding. You needed funding that wasn't getting met in order to meet the rising cost of the actually doing the project.
Sure. And 2 years later, you get the approval you needed for 2 years ago, except now it costs more.
That's right. I mean, we have already spent, I believe, off the top of my head, $1.3 billion, and shovels ain't hit the ground on the LRT line yet. So we've spent $1.3 billion acquiring property and getting the right-of-way sorted. So as the delays added up, the costs kept on going up. A lot of the planners insisted that we needed this underground tunnel to be part of the line to make it functional, but that was increasing over time. And essentially the cost started to outpace the funding that was coming in. So what started to happen is the scope of the project began to collapse. So
now you're spending more money to get less service, and the political case collapses.
The political case starts to collapse. And this started to happen successively where more and more the line got shrunk to the point where the line that was fundamentally being proposed was kind of useless. Like it didn't serve the function that it was meant to serve anymore, but the cost had ballooned pretty radically. And so basically then this week, the province announced we're pulling funding for this line. This doesn't make sense for us to be funding anymore. And of course, the province is now being demonized as like the big evil cutting off the Green Line. I mean, it's easy to look at the province and make it the demon of the day and say you're the big baddie for cutting the Green Line. I think the Green Line has been in trouble for a really long time through successive provincial and municipal regimes. And I think that's been pretty obvious to people for a really long time. So right now, the city has put forward a motion to want to ask administration to look at the possibility of just turning this whole project over to the province. And the province is looking at a potential version of a Green Line system that doesn't involve tunneling. So this would be a totally above ground system that would save a lot of money on tunneling and seeing whether or not a lot of the viability of the project can be restored if it doesn't involve tunneling underground through downtown to get to. I mean, I think this whole project now has been like a decade in the making. Like I said, we've spent more than $1 billion on it, and we haven't put a shovel in the ground. Because we can't. And we can't build things.
Yeah.
And I think this just brings us to the conversation that Matt and we were having darkly off camera about how depressed and increasingly cynical we're becoming in every aspect of civil society and our inability to just function. And you made a really good quote that I thought was worth immortalizing in the podcast forever, and that is, we increasingly don't have governments that are interested in solving problems, they're just interested in exploiting them. I think that's right. I think everybody operates to their incentives.
Yeah.
And except for us, we're dumbasses. But the incentives
Someone wants
here,
to give me 40 million in rubles. Like you're finding me at a moment of like high interest in that kind of an offer.
Rubles to go away, yeah. Everybody operates to their incentives, and the incentives are not. If
any foreign intelligence agency wants to pay me off to just go to an island somewhere, thumbs up. No, you're right. The incentives, Jen. I've written about this before. I've written about the Post, Maclean's, for us. We are looking at the memification of our politics, where the incentive of every political party today is not to solve a problem. It is to either exploit the problem by affixing the blame on someone, or if that isn't feasible, you don't fix the problem, you communications manage the problem.
Right.
And that's how and you and I have lamented this about 1 billion times before, that's how we get up with a situation. It's like, well, there's a lot of fucking psychotic homeless people roaming the streets, chopping, like in Vancouver. A guy got hacked to death this week.
Oh.
And I know full well the response of government is going to be to show up and go, whoa, we have already committed $12 million over the next 5 years to expanded outreach programs.
Yeah.
And there's a fucking corpse on the road. And the response of the political class is not going to be, oh my God, if I don't fix this problem, I'm going to lose my job. It's going to be, if I don't come up with a comms plan for this problem, I'm going to fix my job.
Better yet, it's going to be, let's take this failure and turn it into a fundraising email.
If you're in the opposition, that's what you do. If you're in the government, you communicate it.
Or if you're in the government, you communicate it, and then you blame the opposition for doing it. And I mean, here's also where you get the different orders of government who are playing off of one another, because now you have the provincial government now taking out one of the key sort of infrastructure aspects of the Green Line, which of course was really championed by Nenshi, who is now in their opposition, who's now the leader of their opposition. So you've got a political incentive for the province to pull funding on this line or to radically rechange it so that Nenshi can't get a benefit for it. Which is not to say the Green Line wasn't in deep shit before they pulled the funding. I think it absolutely was. Pulling the funding may be the correct answer, but there's at the same time, there's still a political motivation to do it. Both of these things can be simultaneously true. But now you've got the city who can pass off the blame for their inability to manage the project on the province. Both they can pass the buck on the actual project itself to the province, but they can pass off the blame for not being able to get the project completed onto the province. And they can say, well, this was just all politically motivated. So everybody's incentives are being met here by not building the project.
No, exactly. No one's, and this is, I'm going to agree with that. I'm going to slightly restate it. What we have to realize is that we are in a place as a country where successfully delivering a project on time and on budget is not required for anyone's professional success.
That's right. Yeah.
we have not designed the system in a way to incentivize success and to deter failure.
Because we've allowed an entire system to be built up around inputs as opposed to outputs. Again,
correct.
I've written a column about this a while ago. We judge politicians by how much money they put into a problem, not by whether or not they can successfully resolve a problem by any objective metric.
Oh, and we also judge politicians, and I mean that quite literally. Like, one of the things we're talking about Jagmeet Singh earlier in the episode, right? And there was this, one of his press conferences, I think it was the Thursday one, where he's like, Pierre Poilievre is going to destroy our healthcare system. He's probably not. I don't think he's going to fix it. I don't think he's going to save it. But the idea is that a good politician spends the $12 million over 5 years on new outreach programs, and the bad politician only agrees to spend $8 million over the 12 years on the outreach
That's
program.
a cut. That's a $4 million cut.
That's a $4 million cut, which shows that you don't care about people.
Yeah.
And neither of them
has a
plan to get fewer homeless people, to have fewer homeless people on the streets.
Because that's an objective metric, and if there's an objective metric, you could fail.
Bingo.
Fail that
because no one's actually measuring it anyway.
Yeah.
So what we measure is what we're spending, not what we're accomplishing. And when you were describing the Green Line situation to me, I wasn't familiar with the details, but I've heard that a dozen times before.
Oh, yeah.
Like that's, and one of the wild
in Ottawa, except that they add to that totally incompetently created trains in their trains wind up being disasters as well. Like, same thing, version of that's happened in Edmonton. Like, it's the same story. And you wind up with this horrifically inadequate infrastructure that is shamefully embarrassing for the amount of wealth that we have as a nation.
Which we will lose if we can't keep up with our infrastructure.
Which we are losing.
Yeah. When you were describing the Green Line to me, I don't know if you realize this is more my thing than yours, but you were actually describing Canadian defense procurement.
Oh, good. Oh,
it's
awesome.
Like we need 15 new surface combatants and we need them in 10 years. But then the design phase takes like 15 years.
Yeah.
And by the time we've actually figured out what the ships are going to fucking look like, the budget that was created 15 years ago to design and build the new ships is woefully inadequate.
Yeah.
Because 15 years have passed.
Yeah.
And anyway, so yeah. I am
also, you're hearing my
mine.
daughter in the background because I got an email from my school 6 minutes before the school was supposed to start that told us that, actually, we screwed up. I made a mistake on the calendar, and actually your kid is every other Friday. So one thing I really, really am loving about public education is that we've created an entire education system around the idea that moms are stay-at-home 1950s trad wives who are completely capable of handling literally last-minute changes to a schedule on a whim.
Do you even have the roast for tonight in the oven yet?
Jesus Christ. I mean, the house is a mess. I don't have my curlers in the hair. I am... Yeah.
You even given Alex his shoulder rub yet? Or made him a cocktail? I think probably what we're going to have to do is at some point maybe have a special episode where we maybe do one of our live streams. We haven't done one of those in a while. Where we talk about the dark thoughts.
Dark Jen. The return of Dark Jen.
Well, look, I'm not naturally an optimist. And I'm not going to deny that. I am prone to thinking in terms of failure scenarios from a contingency basis. But I'm not normally as cynical as I am. Like, this is new, and I'm looking for things to feel good about. I actively am. And a friend of mine recently actually suggested a story I should look into, and he said it might improve my mood, an actual success story. And I'm going to do it because I'd like to tell a success story. I really, really would. And I would like to find lessons from the success story that we can apply broadly. Some things are getting better. Some things are. There was this great story. I read it a few months ago. It was in the Atlantic. Where was it? I don't remember where it was, but basically we've cured cystic fibrosis.
Fantastic. Yay.
And like 90% of cystic fibrosis cases had like a common genetic marker. Mm-hmm. And we figured out the drug that fixes that. So there's still the other 10% that we haven't fixed yet. But for 90% of cystic fibrosis sufferers, congratulations, you now have normal life expectancy. Wow. And it was this incredible article I was reading about how people for the first time are realizing I got to plan for retirement. My life expectancy is no longer 50, it's 80. Like I'm going, and I just don't mean like retirement planning, like for financial. It's like, what do I want to do when I'm retired? So like we are making progress on so many things, and we have made social progress, and I don't want to deny that. You've already mentioned him on the podcast today, but Max Fawcett at The Observer, he made a great point to me once where he said, we've got major problems today, but there is no better time to be born gay, or there's no better time in Canada to be born a woman or to be born a religious minority. So we have absolutely made social progress. 100%. Something you and I have talked about off the air recently is how many people in history would have been a Mozart or an Einstein, but they were a little bit on the autism spectrum and they couldn't function in society because no one knew what it was, or they were gay, or they were the wrong religion and they couldn't get accepted. So I'm an optimist in those.
Or they simply didn't get access to the education.
Bingo. Or they had invented the better mousetrap, but no one in high society would talk to their kind. How much human potential has been wasted in history? So I'm an optimist on the sense that I think we're better at that. That's where I am optimistic. Also, our space technology is getting pretty cool. But I am looking at a broad-based retrenchment in the ability of the government to do necessary things. And I'm also looking at, as we were just saying, a retrenchment in the interest of the political class in fixing that problem. And nothing goes down forever. These problems will get fixed. Well, but I think they're going to get fixed after things start failing catastrophically. And I don't want to live through that.
And also,
I would rather skip that phase.
Not to dispute X on this point. And I don't dispute his fundamental point, but I would say a lot of the social progress that we've seen on a lot of those things, and you and I are on board with, like, yes, maximizing human potential via social process is a good thing. Like it's a good thing that women can participate at their full capacity in the market or marketplace nowadays. That is good. However, the problem that I have with this is this idea that that sort of progress will continue at that pace indefinitely. We've hit the point of low-hanging fruit on the gains.
Oh, yeah, you get to
of
diminishing
those sorts
returns in any system.
Yeah, we hit the diminishing returns, and we hit the low-hanging fruit problem with that. Like, and then you start to run into, actually, what's the right way of saying this? Like, you're looking for smaller and smaller and more niche fights to fight on social justice as a result of this particular trend line, and that's fine.
Well, we
that's
started
great.
with, like, black people should be able to vote, and we ended up at, I should use whichever bathroom I want. And I'm not trying to dismiss the valid concerns of trans people. What I'm saying, if you look at the historical trend line here, we are working our way through the list of priorities.
Exactly. And that's appropriate. That's fine. It's good for us to continue this progress. However, the extraordinary gains that we saw as a result of a lot of that early social progress is not going to continue to manifest itself at the same level as we work through increasingly niche issues and niche concerns.
In industrial terms, Jen, we've already harvested the easily accessed materials.
That would be a really cold and calculated and inhuman way of putting it, but it's kind of correct, right?
Aw, thanks.
Right? So there you go.
Flattering me.
But no,
dug out the easily accessible coal.
We dug out the easily accessible coal. Now, every other gain that we make from here on in gets harder, and the benefits that we will accrue from those gains will get smaller.
Well,
right?
Or they will be equal in the eyes of God, but they will benefit an ever smaller group of individuals.
Another way of putting it. I mean, there's another way of us saying that there's a similar thing that's happened on the technological space, right? Like a lot of the major gains that we made to human well-being have really been made from like 1930 to 1980 or 90.
Now we're refining the shit out of stuff to optimize it. Yeah, I know.
Right, and now we're refining the shit to optimizing. In some cases, some of our actual technology is retrenched and gone backwards. Like, God help you if you have a washing machine from the 1990s. Never get rid of that.
No.
Now we've put the internet of shit in literally everything, which has created more and more failure points and issues around sustainability, right? Don't get me started about my fridge. But, yeah, I mean, like, your quality of life, if from 1940 to, you take a day in your life of 1940, your quality of life, I mean, I'm not talking about the war years, okay, war years accepted, let me push that back a decade just for the sake of argument here. Let's say
I was just imagining the Blitz.
Yeah, exactly. Take a day in the life of your average family in 1953 and take a day in the life of your average family in like 1993 and take a day in the life of your average family in 2023. And like, let's be honest, the quality of life improvement is not dramatic.
No, the bigger jump was between 53 and 93. Yeah.
That's right.
And then
that's right.
No, we have still improved. Like, again, if you're a cystic fibrosis sufferer, you have a different perspective on this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree.
But I mean, but in terms, and I'm not talking about quality of life in terms of a social justice perspective. I'm talking about quality of life in terms of your access to a refrigerator and an air conditioner and your ability to put food on the table. Like, I'm talking very bottom of the tier Maslow's hierarchy of needs level quality of life.
I have a VR helmet now, though.
Right. So, I mean, like I said, we're as a society, we're increasingly hitting the end of a particular diminishing returns curve towards social, economic, and whatever else development. And the types of gains and growth we're seeing is starting to slow. Or another way of saying that is like the benefits that we're accruing or the gains that we're making are becoming more expensive and having a more and more minor impact on our quality of life.
And the challenge, I mean, yes, but also as we lose state capacity to deliver core services like public safety, functional transportation networks to permit personal and business related travel and commerce, as we have a healthcare system that fades. I'm not saying the social justice causes of today aren't worth fighting, but what I am saying is that it's going to get harder and harder to fight increasingly niche battles when people are feeling the pressure at the bottom of the pyramid of needs.
Right. Anyway, just something to put
it's going to narrow.
Just something to put a pin on. I mean, that was a bit of a tangent from the Green Line. You want to talk about quickly about Ontario alcohol? Ontario booze?
Yeah, no, it's just funny. So,
because I mean, clearly we're going to need a drink after this particular podcast, and so will our listeners. Sorry.
Ontario has taken a bold step into the late 20th century. As of yesterday, alcohol is now able to be sold. Some alcohol is able to be sold in convenience stores.
It's bold.
So, you know what? I'm actually doing a call to action here to our listeners and our viewers, because I do not have handy a quick cheat sheet of what the status quo is in Canadian jurisdictions. So I'm asking our listeners and viewers in the comments to please comment what your home province is and where are the places you can buy what alcohol. So in our comment section, we'll have a crowdsourced research project take shape. In my recent lifetime, Premier Kathleen Wynne, the immediate predecessor of the current premier, was the first one to put beer into grocery stores. Previously, it had only been available in general terms from either the beer store, which is a private sector monopoly established by government fiat, or from the LCBO, which is the provincial run liquor wholesaler. There were some very minor exceptions where craft brewers could sell directly to the public, but that was a very tiny percent of the market. Kathleen Wynne put beer into grocery stores. Doug Ford, 6 years ago, campaigned on putting it into convenience stores, but he got distracted. And he finally has pulled it off. And out of curiosity yesterday, I took the kids for a walk. I have 2 convenience stores that are within a relatively easy walk of my house. The first one is right down the street. It's a 2-3 minute walk. And they did not have any alcohol products in the store. Maybe they chose not to be licensed. Maybe their license is being processed. I don't know. Didn't ask. I bought my son a chocolate bar so that the cashier did not wonder what we were doing there. And we left. We then took the longer walk to the other convenience store, which now has a small alcohol section. Pre-made wine coolers or vodka coolers, pre-mixed cocktails basically, are now eligible for sale. Wine is eligible for sale in convenience stores, and beer is eligible for sale in convenience stores. And YouTube viewers will benefit now from the photograph, which I'm going to have our producer overlay onto the screen. Those are the first 2 beers from an Ontario craft brewer, a Toronto craft brewer, one whose products I enjoy. I purchased those legally at an Ontario convenience store on Thursday, September the 5th, 2024. on the first day in Ontario history where it was legal to do so.
Historic.
And what I think is remarkable, take a peek if you have the bravery, if you have the garumba, go look at my Twitter feed, because I tweeted a picture of those beers, and exactly as I expected and intended, the crazies came.
The crazies came because you bought a beer.
Would you like me to read you one of the tweets?
I would. Oh, I would. Yep.
So this is...
This is Ontario is not a healthy place.
Okay, I'm going to contest that point in a minute. I am building up to that, but let me read you one of the tweets I got yesterday, all right?
Got it.
So I tweeted a photo of me holding 2 tall boys of a pale ale.
You alcoholic, you.
This person said to me, I am quite frankly tired of self-righteous alcoholics like yourself that don't see how bad this will be for public safety and the healthcare system. They're going to overwhelm EMS entirely, meaning the paramedic service. I would repeat for the listeners and viewers, that was in response to my purchasing 2 tall boys of a Toronto craft brewed pale ale. To be clear, it's not that the products have been legalized. The products are for sale at my local grocery stores. The LCBO, which is about a kilometer from my house, and a beer store outlet that is about 800 meters from my house.
Matt,
all that has changed is the store that I walk to purchase the 2 tall boys.
Matt, if I were really fixated on the impact of substances on public safety and EMS, can I say that my primary concern, particularly if I were in Toronto,
would not be craft pale ale?
It's probably the fentanyl.
Yeah, that would be my guess too.
And not to say that there aren't drunks on the street doing drunky things. No dispute.
Impaired driving, domestic violence, street
no one's
thuggery,
dispute.
100%.
No one will dispute that alcohol is a contributing factor to all of these negative outcomes. But if I were in Toronto right now or in Vancouver, God help you, watch for the machetes. Might I politely suggest that the top priority, the real issues here, maybe it's the fentanyl.
There is something remarkable about the character, I think, of Canadians in general, but I think it reaches apex perfection in Ontarians, where we are astonished and horrified to gradually phase in circumstances that are completely ubiquitous status quos in every other comparable jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Can you buy a beer in a convenience store?
I don't know if I can buy a beer in a convenience store, but the alcohol stores are so ubiquitous that it doesn't matter.
In Quebec, you certainly can. In many American jurisdictions, you can. Ontario has now essentially gradually moved its laws closer in alignment with Quebec, and some segment of Ontarians are panicking. So let me make 2 points. First of all, I want to shout out to my friend Chris Selly, National Post columnist, who has correctly identified this problem, which is that Doug Ford could propose National Puppy Day, and 30 to 40% of the population would come out strongly against puppies. There is something about Doug Ford that triggers a reflexive contrarian response. I'm not a fan of Doug Ford. I'm not going to vote for him, but he's right sometimes. And I am intellectually capable of holding the 2 ideas in my brain, which is Doug Ford is wrong about this, but he's right about this. That does not cause me any particular emotional or intellectual discomfort. This apparently is a remarkably unique trait among my fellow 15 million Ontarians. The other point I want to make, though, and I am going to say this to defend this province of mine, and our friend of the line, Peter Menzies, was gently teasing me on Twitter on Thursday about this, and I feel obligated to make this point. The majority of our Ontarians are okay with this, even supportive of this. we are being shouted down by a wildly loud minority. There has been very little opinion polling about this that's publicly available, and some of what is available actually suggests that this is an unpopular move. But just a few weeks ago, the Toronto Star obtained the government's own internal polling where they polled the population of, do you want beer in convenience stores and wine coolers and things like that? And large majorities of the Ontario population were. And I will
also,
add
once
this,
it becomes normalized, no one's going to give a shit.
that is the incredible thing about Ontarians.
Yeah.
We will forget about this in 2 weeks.
Mhm.
This province was furious about the Ontario Science Centre, and I think the entire population has forgotten about it in a month. So I don't know what it is.
I remember when people
about
were literally
Ontarians.
calling Doug Ford like a coming fascist when he collapsed the Toronto City Council from like 45 councillors to what is it now? 13, 14,
No, 25, I think.
25, yeah.
He aligned
Everybody
it with,
was like, this is, and I didn't even agree with that move. I thought that move required
It's
more
different.
consultation than he went do it. Like, I thought that was actually pretty heavy handed. But I remember people were kicking in doors and like treating this like it was Handmaid's Tale level shit. And
we have lost the ability.
6 weeks later, everyone had forgotten that it had even happened.
I think society in general, but I think particular Ontarians, has lost the ability to make proportional criticisms. And
Mhm.
there is a totally legitimate criticism of this move, which was that Doug Ford spent hundreds of millions of dollars to break existing contracts to accelerate the rollout of this by 1 year. And the speculation is the only reason he did that is because he's going to call an early snap election, and he wanted this done before that happened.
Yeah,
So
makes
that's a
sense.
completely legitimate criticism. And
pretty-
frankly, I agree with it. I would have waited the extra year and saved a few $100 million.
Yeah, I don't know.
But-
Politics is politics, man. It's not something I would actually lose my head over.
No, and I'm not losing my head about this. And it just seems, I don't know what it is with us today. Again, not just Ontarians, but maybe especially Ontarians, where we have lost the ability to be like 6 out of 10 pissed off.
Well,
You know
that's
what? I don't
exactly
like
that's
this.
exactly what an alcoholic who has no regard for public safety and what this is going to do to completely overwhelm EMS would have to say.
Yeah, no, the you know what the funny thing is too? I didn't even drink both pints. I gave one to my dad because here, Dad, here's a
Wow.
freedom beer on
So
the
clearly, this is a generational thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the cycle of trauma continues. So I drank one convenience store beer last night, and clearly it's addled my brain. But I want to make one more point. We can wrap this thing up. You know how you can know that this is popular?
People aren't saying anything about it.
No, I'll tell you how you know this is popular in
All
Ontario.
right, tell me.
Doug Ford did it. Doug Ford runs from the barest whiff of controversy or pushback. The only way anything happens in Ontario is for Doug Ford to have a binder on his desk that shows him it is very popular. Because if this thing was even money, he'd run for the hills.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an excellent point. It's an excellent point. On that note,
So,
and this is
anyway,
why
I'm
you and
gonna
I will never
encourage anyone
ever.
who
This is why you and I
anyone
will
who
never ever
dares
be
go check out my tweets. My retweets last night were
incredible. This is why I'm
I
not on
was
Twitter
feeling
anymore, and I'm a
cheeky,
happier
like I
person.
was stirring it up. I was feeling a little saucy, so I was fomenting controversy, and I'll admit that. But this fucking bronze.
On that note, like and subscribe to The Line, www.readtheline.ca. This has been a long podcast. Thank you for sticking with us. If you have, you are one of our greats, our goats. And if you haven't already, do check out our written podcast and work at www.readtheline. We are hugely dependent on reader support like you. So if you would like to keep us happy, healthy, fed, watered, cared for, and
Craft
chatting.
beard.
Yes, craft beard. Do really consider throwing us a couple bucks and joining our either donate. We have paid on our pages. We have got donate buttons, and also we have subscription buttons.
It's
for
you or
people
the
who are feeling
Russians,
generous.
guys. Make this easy for us.
Oh, joke. We're gonna wind up getting written up in press progress. Oh, lordy. All right. Thanks again, everyone.
Like and subscribe.
Today's podcast was brought to you by Unsmoke Canada. Now is the time to modernize Canadian laws so that adult smokers have information and access to better alternatives. By doing so, we can create lasting change. Learn more at unsmoke.ca.